Hey y'all, welcome back to Silver Ridge Outdoors. I am so excited to be announcing our brand new video series, Moment by Moment. I have been a hunter for most of my life, and I have enjoyed watching hunting videos for most of my life as well. But there can be times every once in a while where I'm watching a hunting video and it can become a little bit confusing watching it. There seems to be a disconnect in what I'm seeing as the viewer and what the hunter is seeing. And oftentimes, it's not that the hunter is behaving in a way that's irrational or illogical, but it's rather he's seeing something or she's seeing something that as the viewer I cannot see. And there can be details that are lost by just watching the video as opposed to being there enjoying the hunt. And this video series is dedicated to exploring those details. So what we're going to be doing is actually going to be reviewing details of this hunt that aren't apparent on video. We're going to be going back and reviewing some of the things that were going on prior to our hunt, prior to the video camera turning on, and also as the video camera is running, we're going to be exploring some details that are difficult to see or difficult to identify. So I hope this video series will be enjoyable and informative for you guys and give you some more insight into the hunt as it unfolded for us, moment by moment. December 7th, 2019, it was the last day I had an opportunity to go gun hunting in the Ohio gun season. Gun season here in Ohio typically follows Thanksgiving. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving and it goes all the way till Sunday. And I usually don't hunt on Sunday, so this Saturday was the last day I had an opportunity to be out in the woods. So I was excited to be out there, went out there in the morning, saw a couple does, but nothing to write home about. And I was planning to go right back to that same spot, but I got a text from a guy that I hunt another parcel with, and he usually hunts it during gun season. I normally hunt it in archery season. So I was planning to let him hunt there, but I got a text from him about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he says, "Hey, I got a buck somewhere else. I'm not gonna be there, feel free to head over there." So I thought, well, I guess that's where I'm gonna end up, because it was a better spot than the spot I had been planning to go to. And I had seen a lot of deer there in archery season, and I knew that if I wanted to fill my buck tag, that was probably the best bet I had, the best option I had. So about 3:45 in the afternoon, I head over there, and it was a little warmer than I had hoped, but as soon as I sit down, I start to see deer. There's does traveling around me. None of them have a clue that I'm even there, and it was shaping up pretty well. But I was still pretty, pessimistic about my chances of seeing a big buck. That's typically how I roll once I find myself that late into this season. But about 30 minutes to an hour into the hunt, I look about 100 yards away from me and there's this buck. And he was so far away from me I couldn't tell for a while if he was a shooter. Due to the human presence in the areas that I hunted that year, just human presence, and there was just a lack of mature bucks. I hadn't been seeing a lot of big boys in that area, so to speak. And so seeing a buck that was borderline shooter was great, and I was excited, and I was thinking that might be a shooter. Every year is going to be different, but this year in particular I was like, I'm going to have a hard time passing up on him, considering how late in the season it is and considering how few shooter bucks I've seen all year. So as he kind of got closer, he was working his way towards me, and he was in this junction, if you will, this network of trails where the deer constantly filter through. And typically in that area, what they'll do is they'll either come in from the west and then leave to the south or to the north, or they'll come in from the south and leave to the west or the north. And of course, the same logic follows for if they came in from the north. And he came in from the west. So historically speaking, our success rates in that kind of situation weren't very high. But it seemed to be different in this situation. He was walking towards me at a fairly steady gait. He was moving slowly, but he seemed to be very relaxed and chill, so to speak. There were a lot of deer in that area that I didn't get on film, but I think that really calmed his nerves, because it's gun season. They've gone through 5 days of hard hunting pressure, so the fact that there were other deer around him that were relaxed, I think made him also to be relaxed. And so he wasn't moving very fast. He was content right where he was. And it was probably about 4:45 to 5 o'clock, somewhere in that range. And I was realizing the more time he spent out there that light was my enemy. Time really was my enemy. The more light I was losing, the less probable my chances were of getting that buck. So the longer he stood out there, the more I thought I'm going to have to do something to draw him in, because historically speaking, the bucks in that situation, in that area, did not filter much closer my direction. I had to do something myself. So I got out my Primo's grunt call and just did a couple communication grunts. I wasn't trying to sound aggressive, wasn't trying to make him feel like he was or should be the subordinate buck in the area and that I was the dominant buck. I just wanted to let him know I was there. I just really wanted to get his curiosity to peak, and maybe he can come over and take a look. Well, as soon as I grunted, his head comes up, and he didn't look directly my way, but I could tell that he was listening and that he had heard me. So that really got me happy, because I've made contact with this buck. I know he's heard me. I don't know what he's going to do, but he at least seems interested. And typically, as bucks do, he lowered his head and just kind of kept doing what he was doing, but I knew he was filing that away in his brain. So I sat there and just waited, and a few minutes later, he starts to just kind of trickle closer to me. And I was getting pretty excited, because at that point he was further towards me than the big bucks usually get. And so I was excited. I knew as soon as he stepped onto property I could shoot, I would have an opportunity at him. But just as I was starting to get really excited, of course, he stopped. And he didn't seem to stop out of being nervous, but he was just almost seemed to lose curiosity in what was over there and the calling that I had just done. And he sat over there with another little buck. There was a little buck that had been around there with him and kind of sparred with him for a few minutes that followed him into the woods, and they were just kind of moseying around. And I didn't really know what to do at that point, because I'd already called. I have had a positive response, but it's not the response I wanted. Do I call again? Do I just lay off the call and hope he'll come in closer? Because time at that point was my biggest enemy and would be the biggest contributing factor if I would get this buck at all. So I didn't really know what to do. I just kind of sat there and hoped for the best. Well, I knew if he headed off to the north that he would be gone, because what they do, historically speaking, is they walk right into the bedding area that was off to my north and they don't come back. And they do that right across the neighbor's property. So I knew if he hit that trail and headed north, he was gone. I wouldn't have a chance at him, period. And he started to head off north, and I really got nervous at that point. And I knew time's my enemy, and now he's starting to head in an unfavorable direction. So I got my call out again. And again, just did 2 short communication grunts. And this time it was off camera. I was really trying to fight the clock, so I didn't worry about turning on the camera. I just wanted to get him into range at all. So after I called, I didn't really see any response from him. He got into this kind of brushy area where there was a lot of brambles and twigs and limbs and stuff, and I couldn't really see anything. I knew he was there because I hadn't seen him leave, and I was looking at him, but I would kind of lose him as he would walk behind the trees. And at one point, I'm not sure where it was, probably about 5-10 minutes after I called last, I'm watching him walk over to the north, and I'm getting kind of discouraged because he's heading right in the direction that I don't want him to go. But then he got into this opening, and I realized that, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't the big buck, that was the little buck. So the buck I had been watching, the big buck, was still out there, and I had kind of lost him in those brambles and in the brush. And the little buck walks off to the north, and he disappears. And I was left there wondering if the big buck was still even there, because the little buck had gone off to the north. I was sure that the big buck hadn't followed him or hadn't gone before him. I would have seen it. But I wasn't sure if he had headed off again to the west or to the south, because there were some other deer that had been in the area and I didn't see them anymore simply because I hadn't been keeping tabs on them. And so I was left there wondering, is he still there or has he gone away? And I didn't notice that. And I just sat there for what seemed like an eternity, but in reality it was only a few minutes, like I said, probably about 5 to 10. And I remember at one point the sun had set, and I was pretty discouraged. I didn't see any more deer. I didn't think he was there anymore. I had figured that he had just left and I hadn't seen it. And I let out this big sigh because I figured my chance at filling my buck tag that last day had gone. So I just kind of sat there contemplating and reflecting on the decisions I made during that hunt, thinking about things that I did and maybe shouldn't have done, and things that I didn't do and maybe should have done. And as I'm thinking about that, my eye catches movement about 40 yards away from me. So I look over there and I see a deer walking towards me, and I noticed that's him. He's coming towards me. He had been there the whole time and he had never left. And I could tell as he's walking in by his gait and how his head was moving around that he was looking for the buck he heard. He wasn't coming in an aggressive manner or a passive manner. He was just looking around for the buck he heard. And at that point, my heart just absolutely accelerated. I hurriedly turned the camera on because he was 40 yards away from me in range on property I can shoot, and he's walking towards me at a pretty steady clip. So I got the camera on, got the gun up, and so just as I get everything set up, he kind of stops in this opening I had. And I thought about shooting him because he stopped, he's at ease, he doesn't suspect anything, but there were some twigs and there was a little bit of brush in the way and I didn't want to shoot through it. And so I just thought, wait, hold on, he's not nervous, you have time, just be patient. And sure enough, he picks his head up, walks a few steps more right into this clear opening I have. And I did one of those meh to stop him. And sure enough, he stops, looks around, gives me a nice quartering two shot, and I didn't hesitate. I had a 12 gauge, so I pulled the trigger and I dropped him right there. And I was ecstatic. Having it come down to the wire like that is never fun. You go through so much to get to that point and so many ups and downs and discouraging times, but the reward is so sweet at the end. You know, every time it happens to me, I'm just so thankful for the opportunity that I'm blessed with to, one, be able to hunt and enjoy God's great outdoors and enjoy the whitetails and just the beauty of creation, but also to enjoy the triumph, if you will, of that moment. All the hard work pays off in that moment, and it's so good. You know, looking back and reflecting on that hunt, I'm thankful that God blessed me with that buck. We had a tough season, a lot of hurdles we had to jump, a lot of ups and downs, and it was a lean year as far as mature bucks go. But I'm thankful that I was blessed with that buck, and I'm glad that I was able to enjoy that hunt.